How to lead a successful educational supervisor interview.
Joe, thanks for meeting up with me again. Just finishing the elderly care post. How is it transmogrifying from a doctor in Australia into a general practice training programme in London? How's that been?
Yeah, it's been surprisingly easy actually. I feel like a lot of what I learnt while I was...
The objectives are to make sure that your trainee's on track with their workplace-based assessment, their log entries, their CBDs, their mini KEXs or COTs. You want to also assess the quality of their reflective entries because, of course, that's a mandatory requirement for workplace-based assessment. And if you can, you want to improve the quality of their reflection by discussing with them what it means to reflect. If there are any issues, to pick them up then. You want to plan out learning objectives over the next post and really over the next years of the training programme. It's a chance to pick up difficulties early on, hopefully, and feed those back if necessary. Hopefully that's just a minority of people. And you need all this information to be able to write your ESR at the end. It's good to start off with quite open questions about how the post has been generally, where they feel they're at, whether they feel they're achieving their objectives, and then going on to the more specific parts of the workplace-based assessment.
Okay. We met at the beginning of the programme when you talked about Australia and we set out what we wanted to do. And just to remind you that today the purpose of the meeting is for the Educational Supervisors Review.
The clinical supervisor supervises their progress through the particular post, whereas the role of the educational supervisor is slightly more holistic. It's to provide an overview throughout the training programme. It's good to break the ice, to be curious about your trainee, to ask them how the post has been going, how they are, what they've particularly enjoyed. I think the relationship and the interview go better if there's a human factor, if you do have some sort of relationship with them and they understand what an educational supervisor is, how your role differs from that of the clinical supervisor.
I've looked through the entries from the various other areas in the portfolio that have had to be made, like the mini KEXs and the CBDs from the people in elderly care. I must say they're all very positive about you, as is the clinical supervisor's report.
Medical students and doctors generally are used to doing well. They don't like being given any grade which implies that they're not meeting standards. So sometimes giving them the grade needs further development doesn't go down very well. It's worth establishing at the beginning what it means and that you're comparing them to a licensed practitioner, an independent practitioner at the end of the training. So you're not comparing them to their peers. And it's not unexpected. You would expect to need further development through the training programme until towards the end when you develop the competences needed. Also explaining to them what the grading means. When you mark them, for example, as needs further development, that's perfectly to be expected. You're only expected to become competent or even excellent at the end of the training, so in the final review. It's useful if you can make sure that the interview takes place somewhere that's quiet, that's protected, that's on neutral ground, so that you both feel comfortable, that you have the protected time. It takes probably about an hour, maximum 2 hours, depending on how much groundwork you do before the actual interview takes place.
You already filled out your own ratings, and I've looked at those, and I'm going to go through with you on my opinion on those ratings.
You would hope that the trainees' self-ratings mirror your own. It's always reassuring if they do. It's a sign that they have self-awareness and they understand the level at which they're at. I think that's, and it's quite telling if there is a marked discrepancy. Either if they think that they're doing much better, which may be a simple misunderstanding, they might be rating themselves as competent according to the stage where they're at, rather than thinking that they're competent to go out and be an independent practitioner tomorrow. And that's always that's a question that's worth posing, if they have marked themselves as competent and you don't agree.
Overall, I'm going to call your progress satisfactory at this stage. But what I'm seeing is very positive.
When the interview's coming to an end, it's always a good idea to summarise the key points which have come up. In particular, the agreed learning objectives, which are going to be taken forward so that there is agreement and you can put it on your ES report.
You could really demonstrate something above what you're doing now by using the material to document what you've seen and apply that knowledge into the patient perspective. I think that would accelerate you from needing further development into demonstrating competency, at least in one competency area.
Sometimes things don't go according to plan, and you get the idea during the interview and before, on the basis of the e-portfolio, that the trainee is running into difficulty. And I think sharing that in some way with the trainee is important. There's lots of information on how to give feedback, but I think being specific and descriptive about the problems which you've come across is important, not blaming them or becoming personal, but actually just describing the issues that you've come across. And I think if you are at a stage where you're going to be escalating it to the programme director, this should be transparent. You should tell the trainee so that they're aware. There shouldn't be any nasty surprises.
I guess what I was looking for, besides the very descriptive and at times emotive way you portrayed what was happening, what did you learn from this? I didn't see that in your learning log.
Okay.
So it happened. It must be now about 2-3 months back that it happened. What did you learn from that? Fitness
to practice is a competency which trainees sometimes struggle to find evidence for, but actually in daily life our fitness to practice is called into question almost every day. So trying to ask them to read the competency descriptor and discussing with them ways in which they can demonstrate it. You know, when did they last come to work feeling under par with a headache, not quite well, maybe they'd had a row with whoever they live with, and how that translated into their behaviour with the patient. So they could write a lovely reflective entry about that.
I learnt that obviously at my stage there's a great deal to be had from a lot of support from my seniors in those sorts of situations, not to feel like I need to take on the burden of all of those discussions with myself.
It's worth bearing in mind that the overwhelming majority of trainees do get through the training programme with a bit of extra help. So it really is in their best interest to pick up any problems early on and share it and be honest. I think being an ES can be incredibly rewarding. You're supervising the same trainee throughout their training period. You're seeing huge progress, hopefully, in that period. And I think the more you put in, as with anything in life, the more you get out. So the more curious you are about the person, the more engaged you are, the more you get back. And so I think, yes, it is a very rewarding role.
Here are some questions that are intended to get you thinking about this subject in greater depth. How can you encourage a learner to write reflectively? How can self-assessment by a learner help with giving feedback? There's further discussion of this subject in our e-learning modules on how to give feedback and on setting learning objectives. Go to faculty.londondeanery.ac.uk/e-learning and select the topics from the left-hand panel. If you're a student on our postgraduate certificate course, you'll find references and suggestions for additional reading within the online resource folder.